This is Mark Lieberman, the host of the radio show The World According to Mark, broadcasting through WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina on 103.7 and streaming on WPVMFM.org. So my guest today is someone who I hesitate to say I've known him for a long time. I knew him a long while back and had some very pleasant experiences with him, and he'll share the time he remembers. But primarily, I knew him because he was a funny guy, a nice guy, a charming guy, and I knew that he was probably going to go far in his chosen career, which is comedy. It's physical comedy, clowning, more serious stuff, musical stuff, a bunch of stuff. And he told me before we got on air that one of the things that he almost did, which thank God he didn't, was become a lawyer, because the last thing that we need in this country right now is another lawyer. But we certainly need a lot of entertaining fellows. So I want to welcome Kenny Raskin on my show today. Kenny, thank you for agreeing to be here with us.
Absolutely happy to be here. I'd like to cross-examine you now, if you don't mind.
Oh, please go ahead.
And please, yes or no answers. See, I could have been a lawyer.
You could do it. You know, I could see how those two things do go together better.
Yeah.
But again, so I introduced the tell that you had thought about going to law school, and part of that was because your father was a lawyer.
Right.
And you were born in Savannah, and then I met you in Atlanta, and you spent a lot of time in Atlanta. But tell us the story about how you decided to shirk the law, not evade the law, shirk the law, and become an actor.
Well, my father was a lawyer, like we said before, and he was well known for being able to settle out of court. He had that kind of disposition. He didn't really like to go to court, but he was good. And he was also a real estate developer, and I admired him a lot. And I just assumed that's what I was going to do until I graduated from college and took a year off and wandered into a theater in Atlanta and got bit by the theater bug. But for the next, I would say for the next 6 or 7 years, even while I was pursuing this acting and waiting tables at night and things like that, I was still struggling with the notion of doing this as a career, getting subtle messages probably from my dad. But at any rate, I just kept doing it, and I started building a career for myself. I started creating material and getting some notice for it. I worked in 1976 for a place in Atlanta called the World of Sid and Marty Krofft, which was an indoor amusement park. And I like to say that I worked there for 6 months, or another way I like to say is I worked there from its inception to its demise. It really closed within 6 months, but I got into mime and juggling and clowning. And the next thing I knew, I was really pursuing this.
So the subtle messages that you got from your dad,
well,
presumably were like, you give it a while, but eventually you actually have to start making money and move out of the basement.
It was less of that. It was more like, you got to become a responsible member of the community. I mean, he had these euphemisms for, this is probably not the way you're probably not gonna support, support yourself. It's an interesting thing that happened is I don't know, maybe I just pushed myself into this place and it worked out, but I ended up doing my one-man clown show in a 500-seat theater in Savannah for one night, and it was a huge hit. And I got paid. I got paid a portion of the door. I remember that I got paid mostly in cash and some checks, because back then in the early 80s, people weren't using credit cards that much. And so I went to my father's office a couple of days later with all this cash, and I said, Dad, I got like $1,200 here and I really don't want to travel back to Atlanta with it. Could I give it to you and you write me a check? And I really think that I saw a light bulb go off over his head. I feel like that's kind of the moment for both he and I, where I think he said, he's serious about this and he's figuring out how to monetize it. I mean, he wants to do this. And I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm serious about this. And I think I figured out how to monetize this.
Well, let me ask you something on
Yeah.
that. As you mentioned it, 500 seat theater solo performance, possibly not your own, first performance, but
Yeah.
Early on in the process, were you petrified? Did you get stage fright then? And then you could tell us whether you still get stage fright.
My job is to not let you see how much I'm perspiring. I always, I recognize the gravity of the situation that I'm stepping into. I take a deep breath and I pay attention to what I'm supposed to do. I think I've always been pretty good at that. That's not to say that I don't get some anticipation, but I've never let it overwhelm me.
You use it in a positive way, which is
Right.
what all good actors and comedians and performers do. So I'd like you to sort of take us a bit through, but let me just your career. From my readings and our discussion,
Mhm.
you've been at this, and we'll define what this means, the shtick, so to speak, for over 35 years. And
Longer now.
longer now. Okay.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
And
Longish.
longish. And within that longish time, you have done many things. And I'll just mention names and then you can fill us in. I mean, you were a clown, I guess, with Ringling. You taught clown stuff there. People obviously know what Cirque du Soleil is, and you had some interesting experience there. You've been in film. You originated a role on Broadway, which you can tell us about. You've done a ton of stuff, and you've been in parades. We saw you in a parade in Atlanta, and you were also on the National Mall doing a celebration of folk art, I believe.
Yeah. Circus. Yeah. American circus.
And in addition to being able to do all those various performances of the stuff I'm talking about. I mean, you ring bells. You can talk about that. and
Yes,
and
I'm a very proficient bell ringer.
you're a bell ringer,
Yeah.
and you've been invited and embraced enthusiastically by both the academic and the corporate world. So you have a lot of stuff. So take us a little through your career.
Well, I guess I'm a dilettante in lots of ways. I carved out something for myself, and I didn't have a long range plan. I literally lived from day to day, drifting wherever the wind blew me. I suppose I steered it somewhat, but I was not thinking 5-10 years ahead of time at all. After I left the world of Sid Marty Krofft and I continued to be an actor in Atlanta, I went to a clown workshop in the woods of Maine. It was called Clown Camp, and it was run by a couple of guys. One guy was an acrobat, one guy was a clown, and I met a lot of great people who I still, 40 years later, I'm still great friends with them and know them. And it was at that workshop that I started creating this piece with a hat and a coat and a crutch, like a guy down on his luck on a park bench with a hat and a coat and a crutch, and I hang the coat on the crutch and the hat on the coat, and my arm slips through and it becomes another person. And it grew into a really nice routine, and people really liked it. I started getting offers to do it on television and at festivals and stuff, and that really I started to build a name for myself within that milieu, which was basically called New Vaudeville back then, New Vaudeville. And, so I did that. And I also taught clowning in Atlanta. I was involved with the Center for the Arts and Puppetry Center for the Arts, the Academy Theater. I did a lot of that. I did commercials. I did some films. I was just, trying to put a nickel in front of another nickel, and I was pretty successful at it. Another thing I did, which was really a lot of fun and really interesting, is I became one of the producing directors of the Atlanta Arts Festival for the Performing Arts Division of the Atlanta Arts Festival in Piedmont Park. And so I got to book a whole lot of really neat acts. I brought this incredible a cappella group from New Jersey. I brought an offshoot of Palabolas. Every year we did a big vaudeville show, which I directed and was in. So I would bring people in for that. The guy that was the main producing director, he had seen Cirque du Soleil somewhere, I guess in New York or in Canada, when he was raving about them and said, "You would love them, you should see them." So I think I watched a little bit. I saw some video of them because I'd heard of them. And then I got real ballsy, and because I heard they were coming to Atlanta. They wanted to be, I called the office and I spoke to somebody. I said, "I know Atlanta really well, and I know the performing arts world really well. I could help you find a spot to perform, to put your tent." So when this guy came and we drove around Atlanta and I showed him places, and I talked about the fact that I was a clown and everything. He said, "Well, you ought to send a tape." And I said, "Well, I'm not a circus clown. I mean, I'm a theater clown, really, come from the theater." He said, "Well, you should send one anyway." So I sent this video to them. And then about 2-3 months later, I got a call from the talent department saying, we'd be really interested in you finishing the national tour. And I went, "Oh, wow, okay." Because they were going to go to Washington and then Atlanta. I was going to finish it in Atlanta. And then so I was planning to do this. And about 3 weeks later, they called and said, "Well, actually, we're going to use somebody who we've used before to finish the tour, but we'll stay in touch." But you can come see the show. So I got tickets to the show and saw it and talked to the artistic director afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. And then about 8 months later, he called again and they said, "We're going to be in Las Vegas. Steve Wynn has hired us to play at the Mirage for the year while we're building Treasure Island, the hotel where we're going to put in a permanent show. And we'd like you to be the clown." And I said, "Okay, but I only want to do it for 6 months." And they kept calling back, and it was very interesting. They kept calling back. This guy, Gilles Saint-Croix, he kept calling me from various places in the world and offering me more money. And finally, he called me from Mongolia. I remember he called me from Mongolia.
They had phones in Mongolia. Okay.
Yeah. He called me and he offered me just this, a hell of a lot of money to do a year. And I turned to my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and she said, "Are you nuts? Would you go do this? You're crazy not to do this." So I agreed, and I went to Las Vegas for a year, and I was the clown in Cirque du Soleil. I was the guy, they called him Everyman, and he was the guy that gets kidnapped from the audience and thrown into the circus. And I was the storyline basically. And you mentioned the bells. I did a bell routine with an audience participation in that. So that was a lot of fun, and I got to meet a lot of interesting people. I met Michael Jackson, and Jerry Lewis came backstage. It was really quite a year, working with this world-renowned circus.
And you rubbed elbows with a lot of people, and obviously,
yeah, I remember once turning around, and I had this moment in the show where I look at the audience, kind of shrug my shoulders at somebody in the front row, and whose eyes did I look into but Lily Tomlin? And so it was kind of fun. It was kind of fun.
Well, I mean, it's hard for me to describe you without saying the word Renaissance, so I won't say Renaissance, but you certainly are a multi-talented individual. You made reference to one of your early acts, the one where you basically use a crutch and your jacket and a hat, put your arm around it in a certain way, and all of a sudden you're two people. And I saw that routine back a long
Back in the
time ago.
day,
And
when I
then
was a youngster doing that, yes.
when you were a youngster, exactly. And then I saw you were kind enough to send a video of you doing it more recently.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a simple thing, but it's spellbinding. And we talked earlier about two of your iconic heroes who are also people that I treasure, that you have some commonality with, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. And so
Yeah.
when you do that routine
Mhm.
and you're able to become two people at the same time,
Mhm.
and make your crutch and your hat and your coat another person, I think of, I at least think of Charlie Chaplin with the forks. I don't know what he had them in, but he did the little
And that's that movie, The Gold Rush,
gold rush
the
and
dancing buns. Yeah.
right. So the dance. So you were your own dancing bun.
Yeah.
But so how did Keaton and Chaplin influence you, and how'd you come up with that idea to begin with? You put
Well,
your jacket on wrong.
No, I came to the workshop with a coat and a crutch and a hat. But what I was doing is I had it on the crutch and I was just dancing with it. Like it was just dancing. I didn't
Okay.
have my arm through anything. And then my big blow off of the act was that I balanced the crutch on my chin.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really a routine. So one of the things we did at this clown workshop is we would break into groups of 3 or 4. We would show the other 3 or 4 that we were with what we were working on. And a lot of times we'd say, why don't you play with it for a minute and let me look at what you know. And it just so happened that this woman, who's still a great friend of mine, she sat down and just her arm went through, and I went, that's it. That's the look. That's it. And so I began to develop, and it was a 13-minute routine. I came out as a blind man begging for money, and then once I got money, I took the glasses off. I wasn't blind, so I had this long story. But then when I started to get offers to do it on TV, they said 5 minutes. That's all, 5 minutes. And so I
get rid of the blind man part.
I cut it down to 5 minutes, And I spoke a cigarette. Listen, let me just plug and say, if you want, anybody out there listening, if you want to watch it, Kenny Raskin, my old friend, YouTube, or you can go to my website, www.kennyraskin.com, videos, and you can see it there.
Okay.
But
So
Mark, I'm about to give you a big thrill. I mean, you can see me. I'm about to put on one of Buster Keaton's hats. This was gifted to me.
wow.
This pork pie hat
Oh my God.
was gifted to me by a man who was friends with his widow. And so this was a hat that Eleanor Keaton made for Buster. He had many pork pie hats, and this was one of them.
It looks pretty good, but you look so much younger than he did.
But
I think he had a face where he looked like he probably was old from birth.
Yeah, I just adore him. I as far as I'm concerned, there's nobody more brilliant in situational comedy than him. There was nobody like him.
Well, let me reintroduce Kenny Raskin. And Kenny is my guest today, who's an actor, a performer, a clown, physical comedy, has done a ton of stuff. And just so grateful to have you on the show, Kenny.
I'm happy to be here.
Talking about these escapades that you've been on. And, I think it's one of the things that's refreshing about your humor to me is you don't do, I haven't seen all of your routines, obviously, but you don't do, dirty work. You don't use foul language, you possibly use suggestive language, but so much of what we tend to see sometimes where it devolves is that those are things that people feel like they have to do in order to get a laugh.
Yeah.
But the things that you do are universal, and kids and old people alike, thrill to see that happen.
That's true. And I tell you the truth, I I could do a school show in the morning and do that same show in the evening for adults. Uh, my awareness, I have an awareness that I'm in front of adults in the evening and kids, but a lot of the material is the same. Now, the only thing is I probably wouldn't light the cigarette in front of kids, but you make certain adjustments, but basically you're right. The humor tends to be universal.
So why don't we just focus a little bit more on a couple of, again, what I think are some of the extraordinary things. You mentioned Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of Cirque du Soleil performances, and they're memorable a lot for the acrobatic stunts.
Yeah.
And we talked before we did this interview. To what extent were you involved in doing some rope climbing? And you had a very nice story to tell about
Yeah.
that. So why don't you tell us again?
Well, the only injury I got from being in Cirque du Soleil was shin splints for running up and down ramps. So I did have shin splints, but no, I was not an acrobat, but there was a giant bird cage on stage up in the, up high on the stage, maybe about, I don't know, 15 feet high in the air. And at some point, the director wanted me to be up there to watch the big trapeze act. So, but I had to get up there within about 2 seconds, and I'm not an acrobat. So I could have climbed it. I knew how to climb, but it would take me about 10, 12 seconds to get up there. So instead, he had two of the big, strong acrobats pick me up and throw me up in the air, throw me as high as they could along the rope. And then I would grab the rope, and with like 2 pulls, I'm in the bird cage. So every night, that's how I got up there, with these guys practically throwing me up into the bird cage. Of course,
Still,
when I came down, I slid down.
I was going to say, still perilous nonetheless. In fact,
Yes.
in some ways, it's more frightening to know that you allowed yourself to be thrown up, and then you obviously had to grab the rope. And
Right.
hopefully you hadn't just eaten some French fries and a hot dog.
No,
So that your
no, I hadn't.
hands were not slick.
I'll tell you a funny story, Mark. Speaking of hot dogs and stuff like that, I used to bite into what was it? Banana. It was a banana. So every night they would film the show. They were doing a documentary, film of it. I mean, shooting of it, so we could watch it and see what we were doing and all that. And there was a TV in the back, in this tent behind the tent, where everybody would gather and sit when they weren't on, so they could watch the show. And the people in Cirque du Soleil were tricksters. They really were. So one of the guys decided that he was going to do a trick on me. And so in my routine where I eat this banana, I opened it up and I took a bite of it. And then they apparently they brought the camera in real close to my face, as my face kind of chewed on the banana and my eyes kind of watered. They had shot jalapeno sauce into my banana.
Well, that's a good routine.
And then another wonderful one was, one of the guys at the show drives a motorcycle. They took his motorcycle and they tied it to a rope and they pulled it to the top of the artistic tent, the back tent. And when Nicky went out to look for his motorcycle, it wasn't there. And he came in and all of us were standing in the middle of the artistic tent, right under his motorcycle. Say, well, what do you think? What do you think happened? He's, I don't know. Where do I call the police? Literally 20 feet above was his motorcycle hanging from the top of the tent. So I loved being there. I really did. Now, about halfway through that run, I got a very interesting phone call, which led me to my next escapade. I got a call from a casting director in New York who was looking for someone to play the role of LeFou, who in Beauty and the Beast, and LeFou is Gaston's village idiot sidekick. And I told him, well, I'm in this show here in Las Vegas till November. He said, well, if you want to come audition, these things can be handled. So if you want to come audition, we'd love to see you. We've heard a lot about you, and we hear you're short, which that's good. And we hear you can sing and dance, and that's good. And they hear that you can clown, and that's good. So on one of my weeks off, I went to New York and I auditioned. I went into the studio and auditioned for the casting director and the vocal arranger and the choreographer. And I don't know if I don't think the director was there, but I'm not sure. He might have been. Anyway, I could tell that I could tell they wanted me right after I finished audition. They started saying, "When can you come back for a callback?" And so I went back about 2 weeks later. I took a red eye back to New York and I auditioned again. And after the audition, they said, "Go find an agent to negotiate for you." And so then I spent the rest of the day lining up an agent, and then I got on a plane and I flew back to Las Vegas to do the show the next day. And the negotiations went on for about 2 months, and finally they agreed on a nice figure. And then I was sent to the Disney studios in Burbank because I had to audition for Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner. And I auditioned for them. Before I left, I said, "I just want you to know that I don't know if you've ever auditioned a shareholder, but I'm a shareholder."
You own one share of stock.
Yeah. Anyway, that night I got the call that I'd been cast, and that and then they had to buy out my contract, and my understudy took over, and they paid me moving expenses. And from there, I went right from Las Vegas to New York for the rehearsals for Beauty and the Beast. We went to Houston and we did the tryouts. I went back to Atlanta. My wife, Joanna, and I got married, went to the Virgin Islands for our honeymoon, came home, packed up the house, and moved to New York for the next 7 years. And for the next 3 years, I was LeFou in Beauty and the Beast. I'm on the cast album and all that. That was an extraordinary experience too.
Well, it is, and I'm actually amazed at what you had to go through once it was clear to you that they actually wanted you, but you still had to continue the process. And
yeah, I had to get
please
signed
the
off by
owners.
Eisner and Katzenberg.
Who would have known they were that hands-on? So
They were.
Now, I know that in that role you were comedic, but you also sing. Because it is a musical, The Beauty and the Beast. So had you had any significant amount of singing in your career before that part?
Well, I had done a few musicals, but no, I'm a singer. I'm a character singer. I play musical instruments and all that stuff. So no, I mean, I just knew I could play this role. I listened to the soundtrack from the film and I got a sense of the character. And it's the nice thing about being a character actor is that you don't have to have a perfect voice.
Right.
And that is really, I have I can sing in tune and all that. But I learned a lot about singing from a guy named David Friedman, who was the vocal arranger. And he said, sometimes you can speak a line and it can be as powerful as singing. And secondly, you can back phrase and front phrase, and so you want to make it sound like you're talking to people.
It's Rex Harrison and My Fair Lady, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
So
it's great.
So you picked it up, obviously, and you were evidently you were the original cast member of that, which is quite extraordinary. Let me again, for those just tuning in or for those who forgot what we're doing on the air here, I'm speaking with a really entertaining fellow and a nice man, Kenny Raskin, who's going through some of the high points of his acting career and his singing career, his Broadway experience. We haven't got to the movies yet or things that you've done on television, which we'll get to in a moment. But I do want to ask you a question. Is your wife involved in any respect in the theater or business that you are? What does she do?
So she was an acting intern at the Alliance Theater when we met. I was doing a play called I'm Not Rappaport. I was 39 years old and I was playing, or I was maybe a little younger, but 37 or something. And I was playing an 80-year-old man. So she fell in love with an old man, but she came backstage and she just said, "Oh, you were great. And I know some of the people in the show." I thought she was really cute. She was wearing this vintage dress, and I thought she was really, really cute. And so we all went out afterwards, and one thing led to another, and I called her for a date, and the rest is history. But she was an acting intern, but then she ended up being working for Coca-Cola. That was her day job. She was in the corporate communications department. When we moved to New York, she got introduced to the people that worked in the wig room at Beauty and the Beast, and they trained her to be what is called a swing. So a swing is somebody who takes the place of somebody. It's different than an understudy. An understudy is usually an understudy for actors is somebody who's going to play your role and no another. The swing is somebody who can do a lot of different things. So Joanna was trained to be a hairstylist or a wig person, and there were 11 wig people backstage. As many people as there were in the show, there were that many people backstage working. So she ended up having a very nice career in New York, swinging on Broadway for various shows.
Tasks that have to be done
in the hair
scenes.
department.
Got it.
When we moved to Boston, she would do some shows that would come here. She'd go down to downtown and work in the theater. But because she's in the union, she started getting these movie gigs. And since we've been here, she's done about 30 films. She does hair on movies. So tomorrow she's working on the Boston Strangler. And
is there any hair in that movie? I didn't
know. And what else? She did Daddy's Home and Daddy's Home 2. She did Ted and Ted 2. She's done a lot of stuff with Adam Sandler. She wouldn't do the stars, but she works. Yeah, she has a nice little career where she works on movies.
Well, one of the reasons I asked you about that is that I think most people that know anything about theater and acting and actors know that it's a tough job, even and maybe particularly once you've made it the way you have made it, because you're pulled from pillar to post. There's a lot of travel involved, and there's a lot of pick things up and go someplace. And it's good that your wife obviously is involved in sort of the operational aspects of it. So she accompanies you, but I suppose there's been times where you've had to be away for long stretches, and that can put stresses and strains on the relationship.
Yeah. I went back to Atlanta in 2015 and did I'm Not Rappaport again with the same, there were two old men in the show, and neither of us were old at the time, but now we're older. We did it again. We were hired to do it again. And I was gone for 6 weeks. She came down to see the show, obviously, but most of my traveling has been, 2 days at a time, 3 days at a time, maybe a couple of weeks at a time, doing this corporate teaching that I've been doing, corporate communications teaching. So, but she knows I'm always coming home. So, yeah.
Well, that's again part of the bargain, I suspect.
Really
but so, I mean, in addition to being as successful as you've been in theater and music, and we can touch on the films that you've been in, keeping a marriage together is in sometimes a full-time job. So
I like, Mark, I'd like to think that my going away, the reason why it's worked is she got a break from me. I'm not kidding.
Well, I understand that too, but in any event, so we can talk. You moved to Boston, and you moved to Boston. You can tell us why, but I think it might have something to do with the teaching that you've been doing in that area. But maybe there was another pull there to begin with.
Well, I got tired of show business a little bit in New York. The story behind that is that I was in a play that we went to Baltimore for 6 weeks and New Haven to Yale Rep for 6 weeks to get it ready for Broadway. When I came home, there were 7 people in the cast, and 5 of us were were made redundant, as they say. Uh, and it was an interesting experience because all the while we were doing the show, the producers were telling us how we were all going to Broadway with this. But when we got home, they realized that they needed to find some names that could sell tickets, because maybe we didn't have, that kind of name. And it was really interesting because I remember now seeing certain people coming down to see the show in Baltimore and New Haven, so that, and I just thought, you know what, if you had told me that you didn't know who would go to Broadway, but do you want to do this tour and we'll see when we get there, that would have been fine to me. But I felt a little bit duped and betrayed, or however you want to look at it. And I thought, I don't really want to be in the business of show like that. I want to be more in control of my career, that's how I felt about it. And at that particular time, a friend of mine who was running a corporate communications company, she was an actress, and she uses acting skills to teach business people leadership communication skills. She asked me if I'd be interested in learning how to teach this stuff. And I said, yeah. And so I lived for the first 2 years that I did it, or 3 years actually, I lived in New York. And it was all about getting on a plane and going somewhere. But our son turned 2.5, and we were looking at nursery school. And I don't know if you know this, but nursery school is a 3-day-a-week program in New York City. And it costs at that time, it cost $16,000 a year to send your kid to nursery school. That is, if you could get him in.
Right. So that's more than my 4 years of college at a state university. I get it.
You get into college in New York City easier than you can get into nursery school. And we started looking around, and my sister lived in this little town called Needham, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston. And we moved there. Now, at that point, we came up, we found a house, and then I had to go to Germany because I had a 6-week engagement in a variety theater there, doing my park bench beats and stuff. So my darling sister handled the inspection, the closing, the painting, the this, the that. And then when I came back from Berlin, we packed up the apartment and moved to Needham, and that's where we are, because the company is headquartered in Boston, this communications company. And so, not that I needed to be here, but it seemed like a good place to be.
So that company is Ariel.
Yeah, Ariel.
And I'd like to talk about that in a minute, but let me just comment on what you said, because I think it's an interesting facet, again, that people that don't appreciate the struggles, the ongoing struggles, and the fact that there are highs and lows and disappointments. Here you were, an obviously accomplished performer who had, was on Broadway, Cirque du Soleil, recognized television appearances, worldwide tours, and so on and so forth. And yet it's a business at the end of the day. It's a brutal business. And you didn't say it, and you're obviously not apparently the kind of person that, you might take something personally, but you have a way of picking yourself up. You said, as you indicated, sort of enough is enough. I've done this thing. It's great. But there are other things I can do if they present themselves. And lo and behold, something unexpected presented itself. And you took the bull by the horns, if that's the right expression. And that's when you started doing the experience of teaching. Now,
so I'll tell you something real quick, Mark.
Sure.
There were bigger fish in that play that got let go than me. There was a woman named Mary Beth Peel, who was very well known in New York as an actress. Well, guess who was available? Betty Buckley. Okay. Patti LuPone's brother, Robert LuPone, well-known New York actor and well-known on TV. Bobby LuPone was in this thing. F. Murray Abraham is who they wanted. Okay. They needed that. So the only two people they kept were the ingenue, the male and female ingenues, and the rest of us, What I found out actually was that they had asked some of these people to go on tour, and these people said, "No, I don't want to go on tour, but if you come to Broadway, I'd be interested."
Right. Well, again, I think this is a lesson, particularly, as you know, I do a bit of acting here
Uh-huh.
in Asheville, did some acting in Philly. And, when you audition for something and you think you're great, you don't get the part, you get disappointed.
Yeah.
But for all those out there listening, thinking that, oh, once you've made it, you've made it. And no, it doesn't work that way, because
No, it doesn't
at
work
the end
that
of the
way.
day, it's still a business, and the objective is to get people in seats and sell tickets and all of that stuff. But in any event, you obviously not only landed on your feet, you did a somersault and got up back on your feet. But here's the question that I want to ask you about Ariel, and just give us a start off, and then I want to touch on your musical career. One doesn't at least I don't automatically think of something that the acting community can teach to managers, because business, particularly in the companies that have been your clients, I mean, they're big companies, they're Fortune 500 companies,
Yeah.
probably some smaller ones. And, you tend to think of those people as, staid, if they crack a smile, it's usually at your expense. But the question that I have for you is, what is the crossover? Why do they want people like you talking to those kind of folk?
Well, Kathy and her partner Belle, who was, she started this company with, they were running a small theater in Newton, Massachusetts, and they taught classes. And one of their board members, who was the CEO of a small consulting firm, took a class with them. And when it was over, he remarked to them, he said, this was a lot of fun. I had a great time, but I'm shocked. I'm surprised to realize that a lot of the skills that you utilize to do your job are very similar to the type of things I try to do or want to do in my job. It's about, okay, an actor needs to communicate the story that they've been given to communicate. And they have to get the audience involved, not only analytically, but emotionally. And a leader needs to tell their story, or tell the story of the company, or tell the story of the strategy, the direction in which they want to go. And a lot of research says the way you get people to go along with them is by connecting with their heart. In addition to their mind, people want to do what you want them to do when they feel something about it, more so than when they think something about it. And so in leadership, and what we mostly focus on is leaders and emerging leaders, where the job is no longer, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, but how would you go about helping me get here? Or, we need to get here because this is, so how can you contribute? How can you contribute? So you really, it's about training the leadership of other people. And if you go back to acting, it's about getting people to go on the ride with you. Okay. And leaders need to get their people to go on the ride with them. And
So-
that's how it happened. That's how it connected. And we tell them what we're going to do in the workshop is, first, we're going to take you outside the box. We're going to go outside your comfort zone. We're going to go do things that you go, what the hell am I doing this for? But we're going to bring it back. We're going to say, now, what in this exercise seems relevant to you? And how do you think you can use your voice better, your gesture better, your face better? How can you listen better? How can you use stories, personal stories? This is just a myriad things involved.
So I get it. So it's basically, you're teaching people who are inclined to be very analytical and to concentrate excessively, perhaps, on what it is they want to say,
Right.
and less so about how to say it, how to engage, how to motivate.
Right.
But true leaders that are successful, just like, I had somebody on the show a couple of weeks ago who was talking about how coaches of football teams, it's not just about knowing how to play the game, it's knowing how to motivate a group of men to do something. So that's what you do.
The best coaches, the best athletic coaches do that. You want to win for them. I'll share a quote with you. I love this quote more than anything in the world. It's by a guy named Mike Lipkin, and I wish I could remember the book that I read it out of, but his name is Mike Lipkin, and it goes like this: who you are being when you are saying what you are saying says more about what you are saying than what you are saying.
Wow.
And so I say, I say to people, I'm here to work with you on who you're being when you're saying what you're saying, because I don't know what you should say. That's not my job. I don't know your business like you know your business.
Right.
So,
But the talent that you have is is to teach them a universal thing.
well,
Let me.
I'm one of about 50 doing this in the company. So,
Okay, and you have a very impressive client roster. I think I saw Procter and Gamble, that I might not have, but Coca-Cola or whatever. So you've got some true corporate stars that you're working with. Well, before we get out of time, which we're not, but you are self-described, and it has been described, you are a multi-instrumentalist, which means that you can play a lot of instruments. And you play a lot of instruments, you sing, and you write songs.
yeah.
So I see a guitar in the background. There may be a ukulele around there or something. I'm going to ask you if you could do something for us on air, so to speak.
Yeah, I'll do a song that, again, it's on my website. I have this love for 30s and 40s style music, and I wrote this tune in the 30s and 40s style, and then a friend of mine who actually is a rabbi, believe it or not, great. He's a rabbi and an ethnomusicologist. He was the rabbi at Hillel at Tufts, and we play on Saturday. He and I and about 5 other guys get together on Saturday and play. And I said, I've got this little tune. I'm going to play it for you. When it was over, he said, can I write lyrics for that? And I said, yeah. So song is called Sweetheart. It's music by Kenny Raskin and lyrics by Jeff Summit, Rabbi Jeffrey Summit.
And then you'll introduce us by name, at least, to the other players, what they come from all walks of life. But
right.
Go ahead.
Ooh. While we were talking, it went out of tune. So wait 1 second.
Just from us talking, it probably went out of tune. And for all those who don't see this but are listening, he's tuning by ear. He's not using one of those fancy electronic gizmos, which is what I use the few times I play my guitar.
That's just because I'm too lazy to reach back for it. I took a trip out on the ocean blue, but it was not much fun there without you. Of all the things that I do, the best is you, sweetheart. I took a carriage ride through Central Park. I thought about you in the dark. Come on and light a fire and be my spark, sweetheart. The world out there is a stormy place. If I can't see you smile, I'll be with your sweet and warm embrace. There's blue skies all the while. Oh, without you, I am lost at sea, with nothing but clouds surrounding me. Come on and be my sunshine. Smile on me, sweetheart.
Oh, that was great.
That's a shortened version of it.
Ladies and
I don't have
gentlemen,
all the band.
Kenny Raskin performing on, I assume that I have that in perspective, that's a ukulele,
That's a ukulele.
not a small guitar. Okay.
No.
So
that's I made a record a couple years ago. I made my first CD and I called it My Greatest Hits.
your first CD, Greatest Hits. Okay.
Right. So that leads it off. So yeah, I have a group I play with on Saturday. One is a ghostwriter.
Okay.
He wrote Lee Iacocca's autobiography and Magic Johnson's autobiography.
They didn't write their own. You're telling me they didn't write their own. Go ahead.
With him, and he does private books. He wrote he wrote a book for Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots.
Yes.
But his big claim to fame is his son was one of the producers and actors on The Office.
Okay.
So, and let's see, a software, a scientist, software, a pulmonologist. What else have we got there? No, another rabbi. Two rabbis who like to
So,
drink scotch.
so accepting you, all of those folks do something very different.
They
in
didn't
their
know what I
real-
did. They didn't know what I did when I joined.
Oh, you didn't tell them. They thought,
Well, I
oh,
don't. I think
accountant.
I think it became clear to them after a while. But no, it's a wonderful group of people. I call us the Alta Cockers. You know, I
And
think
for
we
the-
mentioned that. Yeah, the Alta
We did. There's probably a few people out there
Yeah,
don't know what that means. So roughly translated, it means,
old farts, basically. Let's just go there. And
okay. I like to say just old grumpy,
yeah,
sort of interesting fellows, but with a crotchety personality. All right. Well, you're certainly not that. So in any event, so
I'll tell you real quickly. But
go.
that song that I just played, obviously you can get it, an Apple or whatever you want. You can find it out there under my name. But on my website, I did a little music video of it, and because I was just learning how to do this, all I did was take pictures and sort of make a photo collage of the song with trying to use the line like I'm lost at sea. You just see a life preserver in the middle of the ocean. And so I was just trying to characterize the lyrics, but then in the instrumental part, I have pictures of sweethearts of all races, colors, sexes, genders,
So
That was a lot of fun to put together.
So it seems obvious based upon what you had done previous to that you would be great at the lyrics, but you actually are writing the songs themselves.
Well, I didn't write those lyrics, but I write, yeah, I have my own songs too. Yeah.
So where do you see that in terms of all the myriad of things? You're not giving up the comedic art, so to speak, and you're still working as a consultant, and you're still doing, I guess the word is gigs, but music is somehow at this point in your life taken on a new meaning for you.
Yeah, I don't think I would. I'm so glad I arrived at this. I mean, I consider myself semi-retired. I mean, I work when I want to, and I work mostly out of my house, doing most of this virtually. I'll go on the road when they need me to. And I also run a hospital clown troupe in Boston. So again, I manage, I coach and teach them clowning. And so I have a lot of time. I mean, I'm here in my office a lot and on my studio. And this is where I'm focusing now. I'm just focusing on writing music and putting out another CD. This new CD is going to be less vaudeville-ish and much more personal. I got a song about my son. I got a song about after I came out of the hospital. I have a song called "How Am I Supposed to Know If You Don't Tell Me?" So that's a song about somebody who was mad at me and I didn't find out till later. So I wrote a song about that. And I always said when I do that song publicly, and my wife is there to say, "This is not a song about my wife."
I understand. Well, obviously, I won't say serendipitously, but we're in these interesting times here where you're not sure when it's, quote, safe to go outside with a mask or another jab in the arm, as they say. So in a way, not that anybody sort of wishes this to continue any longer than it obviously needs to be, but you're perfectly positioned now. You've got everything around you. You can access anybody all over the world. I mean, they can't throw you up on a rope again at Cirque du Soleil.
No, they can't. I'm not going up there.
But those days are probably over for you anyhow. But you're situated to pursue a lot of the stuff that you've done throughout your life, and then this musical career. I don't know if that's the correct word for it, but
Yeah, it is.
it's now it's helping to enrich you and enrich those folks that you meet with and those folks you play with. So
Well, it's a collaborate, about everything I'm doing is a collaboration, because the songs are not just me on the guitar or me on the ukulele. I've got one song with clarinet and trombone in it. A lot of interesting collaborations. Another collaboration I did during the pandemic was a friend of mine who's again a wonderful clown, and oddly enough a corporate trainer too, out on the West Coast. His name is Jeff Raz, and Jeff wrote lyrics to the tune of John Henry, but he called it Joan Henry, and it was about the pandemic and about the nurses and the heroism of the nurses. And he sent it to me and he said, can you play it and sing it? And so I did, and I made a video again with a photo collage of that. So Mark, you should look at it. It's really interesting. He talks about the nurses, and he talks about people going to the White House and all this stuff. And that was a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying being cooped up.
well, you're enjoying the peace of being able to focus on your own time and
Exactly.
in your own way is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Well, we just have a little bit of time. Let's see if
Yeah.
there's anything else that you want to talk more about. You've got another album, I think, in the works you had mentioned.
Yeah.
I guess we still call them albums these days.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'll press this one. People aren't pressing CDs. My son, who's also a brilliant musician, wants me to make a vinyl copy, so I might do that. I don't know. I mean, it costs a lot of money to press these things, and then I pressed 300, and I still have probably 150 left of the last one, and I sold 60 or 70 of them, but I'm not in this for the money. This part of my career I'm not into for the money.
Yes. So can I ask you if your son is funny as well as being a musician? Have you handed off
He's
any of those
humorous.
genes to him? He's humorous.
He didn't get into the clown thing. He got into the music thing. I always say that he got his character from my wife,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of decency, of manners, of empathy, and all that, and he got music from me.
Okay.
And
Well,
and he
I'm-
really
I'm going to have to disagree with you because I know you enough. He
All right.
got a lot. He got a lot of those things from me
he
too.
did, but I have to say my wife was much more attentive to teaching him the long-term lessons of life.
Well, let me sort of close up here to say
Uh-huh.
again, you are a marvelous human being.
Thank
I
you.
wish that we had been greater in touch over the span of time, but I'm so happy to have caught up with you again. And as I said in the beginning, I knew, and my wife and I both knew, that you were going to be tremendously successful. And to use another Yiddish expression, you are a true mensch as well as being a very talented person. So I want to thank you for being on the show. You gave the website. Want to hit it one more time for the website, please?
Yeah, www.kennyraskin.com. YouTube, Kenny Raskin. I have a YouTube channel. I have music videos and music, and just play music on the website.
You're all over the place.
Yeah, heartsandnoses.org is the hospital clown troupe that I lead.
Well,
that's all the dots I have.
Okay, well, that's enough done.
Yeah.
Wait,
Mark, I told you before when we first talked that I have a real love of Asheville, and it should not surprise you that you might see me there one day.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Bring your ukulele.
I
All
will.
right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Kenny.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
You bet.